What's your favorite scary movie?
Listen to their screams.
Greetings, ghouls and creeps, and welcome to Listen to Their Screams, a horror podcast. I am one of your hosts, Dave, and I'm joined as always by Ike. As we go into this week, I only have one question for you, Ike. What is your favorite scary movie?
I'd have to say just maybe Scream, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe even if it's not. And this week it is. We're all about the Scream franchise this week, and well, pretty much next week too.
Yep.
Because we are officially, as we record this, one day away from the actual early release of Scream 6. It'll be the day of once this episode is recorded. But before we get into all that, really quick, some of the logistics here. Make sure you subscribe to us wherever you're listening, and make sure you look us up and follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and TikTok. Just look up Listen to Screams. That is Listen, the number 2, and Screams. As always, this is a movie review podcast. We do discuss movies and review them, and there will be spoilers in that, especially in this one. But let's be real, most of these movies are 20 plus years old. If you haven't, or at least some of them, if you haven't seen them yet, oh well. But there are spoilers. So, Ike, here we are. We're right here. We've been talking about it for, I don't know, what feels like forever. We are both super pumped, super excited for Scream 6. I mean, I'm so excited. I've already bought my tickets. I'm ready to go tomorrow, Thursday night, or well, as of release tonight, on Thursday, March 9th. I've got my tickets. I'm going to opening night to see Scream 6. I cannot wait. Ike, how pumped are you for this movie?
I'm super duper pumped. Unlike Dave, I won't probably be able to watch it until like Saturday. I think me and my wife are going to go Saturday morning. Just how the show times are lined up for Thursday, is either it's too late or too early. Like it's too soon after I get off to be able to make it. It's a mess. So yeah, probably won't be able to see it until Saturday. But I'm super duper excited, and we're going to try and go as early as possible.
Yeah, me too. I am too. So before we got all kinds of fun stuff in the show. We're talking pretty much exclusively about the Scream franchise. We're going to do our top 3 favorite Scream movie openings here in a few minutes. We're also going to do rank from 5 to 1 our favorites of the Scream franchise thus far. And then in the final segment of the show, we're going to discuss Scream 6 and what we would like to see, what we predict we'll see. We're just going to discuss it and just spitball on it. Ike, before we get to that, just for the sake of the listeners, let me ask you: Have you seen or read any early reviews, any leaked information, anything regarding Scream 6?
I've not read. The only leaked information that really I've seen was the whole Kirby being in it. I remember we talked about this probably last year.
And that's already been confirmed, so that's whatever. That's neither here nor there at this point.
Right, water under the bridge. Otherwise, obviously, I've seen the trailers, and I've seen one review, and it was from somebody who got an early screener, and they, I'm not going to say what their opinions were because I don't want to influence anybody, but generally it was positive. So outside of those 3 mediums, I have not seen anything. I've been trying my best to stay away from pretty much anything, even people talking theories. I've tried to stay away from those.
Me as well. And my point being, later on when we discuss and we give out some predictions and what we'd like to see, whatever else, this is purely from us. We're not there's no influence, there's no information, there's nothing. So whether if we happen to be right on anything, that's just happenstance there. It's just luck, because we've not seen anything. I've really avoided. I've seen a few little things here and there about people tweeting, this and that. It was all spoiler type free stuff. It was just a general, feeling on the movie. I don't put any stock in that anyway. I don't care.
Yeah.
Right. I don't care. I hope everybody loves it, but it's an influence my opinion on it. So anyway, before we dive into Scream though, let's talk about something we've been doing on Twitter this week. Here we are. We're in March, right? And March is known to a lot of people for March Madness, right? For the NCAA college basketball tournament, the big 64 or however many teams it is now tournament to crown a national collegiate basketball champion. So we thought we would do something similar on Twitter, right? And through Twitter polls, and we would do what we call Slash Madness. And it's we've only got 16 because God knows I'm not going to coordinate and do 64. I mean, when you be scraping for some characters if you do it 64. I'm not saying we couldn't come up with it, but some of those are throwaways, so why even bother? Right. But we come up with 16 characters, and we've had polls that we've gotten a lot of good response, a lot of good feedback, a lot of good interaction, and really good results on the voting. We have completed our 8 first round matches. So before we get into the Scream talk, let's talk Slash Madness here. And again, these are first round matches. What I did is I used an online web-based tournament, generator. And basically, I just kind of snowballed, or whatever you want to call it, these 16 in an order, right? I just kind of, put them in what I thought were iconic status, or whatever you want to call it, most known status, to give some form of a ranking, and it generated everything from there. So in the first round voting, let's talk a little. We won't, go too much because, again, a lot of these are not really surprises, right? One of our first round matches, Michael Myers defeated Angela Baker. Michael Myers got 92%. I love Angela Baker, love Sleepaway Camp, but I mean, that's no surprise, right? Michael Myers is an iconic, and that's what the name of the game was. It's the most iconic horror movie killers. I mean, you don't get a whole lot more iconic than Michael Myers. So I don't think there's any surprise there. Pinhead beat the Leprechaun. Pinhead got 67%, so that was kind of close. I mean, I think that kind of surprised me a little bit, right? That it was that close. I thought, Hellraiser had probably a little more, notoriety or whatever you want to call it. But again, it's a pretty solid victory. We're talking Scream. So Ghostface beat Norman Bates from Psycho. Ghostface with 87% of the votes. Leatherface beat Candyman. Leatherface got 64% of the votes. Jason Voorhees beat Victor Crowley. Jason had 95%. Again, I mean, do you get much more iconic than Jason Voorhees? No, no disrespect to Victor Crowley, but come on. And what I thought would be kind of a close voting matchup for the first round, and it was pretty wild that it worked out. And with no pre-planning, it worked out to Clown versus Clown. Turned out to not really be that close at all. Art the Clown beat Pennywise. Art got 75% of the voting. And then in a absolute landslide, Freddy Krueger beat the Creeper. Freddy Krueger got 100% of the votes in that one. But again, I mean, come on, Freddy's in the holy trinity of iconic movie killers. And then in the final match, Chucky beat Jigsaw. Chucky got 75%. So again, a lot of surprises there, but I mean, that's kind of how first rounds often go. The second round matches I'm going to post on Thursday, the day of the release of this episode. And those matches are going to be, so this is where I want to kind of talk a little bit, right? Because these get a little more intriguing. Again, the first one, maybe not so much, but I mean, we have Michael Myers versus Pinhead, right? I like Pinhead. He's an iconic character, but again, is there really a more iconic movie killer than Michael Myers? I don't see this one even being close at all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's one of those things where you look at a matchup, and like you said, I think Michael Myers is probably the what's the phrase? The penultimate of serial killers in film. Obviously, Pinhead is great. He brings definitely sort of that paranormal, like supernatural aspect to the slasher genre. But Michael Myers is the original. You know what I mean? He pioneered the trade in the slasher genre in a lot of ways. So yeah, I think Michael Myers will definitely sweep on that poll.
Yeah, I do too. And then in another second round matchup, Ghostface versus Leatherface. This should be interesting. Both very iconic. Both have some great films. But I kind of feel that, especially given the modern landscape and all the hype with Scream 6 and everything else, I kind of see that Ghostface is going to run away with this one a little bit.
Yeah, I would also agree with that. I think that specifically because you have the movie coming out. And because, not to say that Leatherface doesn't have a whole lot of immediate attention, because realistically he doesn't. I mean, he had that new movie back in last year or so, or a couple years or whatever, whenever it came out. That's all fine and dandy. But I feel like Scream's kind of had a resurgence in this new age. They've picked up on that, that kind of formula that Halloween's picked up on, the requel that they call it. So I think Ghostface will sweep in that area as well.
Yeah, and then the third second round matchup, which would be fun to see. But as much as I like Art the Clown squaring off with Jason Voorhees, and man, it's just a tough choice, right? I love them both, but I mean, hopefully people give us some thought because it is for iconic. And while Art the Clown is great, and I truly think he is iconic, he doesn't really quite have the catalog yet of a Jason Voorhees. So I think this will probably be a pretty good voting battle. But Jason Voorhees is one of the most recognizable movie characters of all time, not even outside of horror. So, but it will be fun. You never know. If there was going to be an upset in this round, I think that might be the one. If there is, going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree. If I were voting on this, I would probably vote Art the Clown simply because I love Jason Voorhees. I love Friday the 13th. But I feel like the Terrifier movies have been more impactful on my personal, my internal, what would you say, my personal library, I feel like you could say. I'm not sure how to word that, but basically Art the Clown's made more of an impact on me personally as a character in terms of my tastes in horror and everything else. So I would personally vote Art the Clown just because as much as I like Freddy or Jason Voorhees, I think that Art the Clown is almost more iconic to me personally.
Yeah, and in the final second round matchup, this one might be a tough one because both these guys have a very, very strong followings. We have Freddy Krueger versus Chucky. I know which way I would lean on it, but hey, I love them both. They're both great characters. Both have some, they got some great movies. They got some not so great movies. But it's this should be a kind of a knockdown drag out because, like I said, both of them have very, very passionate fans that are very loyal to the characters.
Yeah, if any of these are going to be close, at least in my opinion, this one's going to be the closest. I think this one will be the one that comes down to the wire. I think the other ones, the first two are going to be, I think honestly the first three are going to be pretty straightforward wins for for Myers, Ghostface, and Voorhees. But I feel like Freddy Krueger versus Chucky, like you said, they have their own cult followings. They have their own independent. Chucky's been kind of he's made a huge resurgence with the TV show. Freddy Krueger, frankly, he hasn't been around for a while. I mean, When was the last time we got a Nightmare movie? It was back in 2013 or something like that, 2012.
Yeah, the remake.
So, I mean, speaking solely from presence and media, Chucky's got it on that one. Freddy Krueger might have the iconic take and the legendary status, but presence versus status can sometimes make that upset. So I think that'll be the closest of all four, if I had to say.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see because again, I'm a fan of this kind of stuff, right? I like tournament type stuff and the what ifs, right? Hey, what if this guy fought this guy, or what if which do you like more? I like that kind of stuff, right? It's fun to me, and I think it sparks a lot of good discussion. And I hope people, and if you're listening, and or follow us on social media, I hope you'll get out there and vote in this, and just pick what you like, right? Don't be influenced by what we said or what anybody else likes. Just go with who you like. And it'll be fun to see. You never know what's going to happen in these things, right? I mean, it's all based on people and who's turning out to vote. So and it'll be fun. And once we get past this round, we'll talk about the next round, next episode. That's really going to get down to kind of the nitty gritty, right? Because we're in eight here. By next round, we'll be down to the final four, and that's where it's really going to get interesting. And I think next episode, we'll really get to dive into some discussions and I think we'll really play the what if game when we get to the final four and then the final. Those will be fun to talk. So get out there, vote for Slash Madness. It's again, the polls are on Twitter, but I put up links on pretty much all of our social media to get you there. So look us up again. That's at listen to Screams. That's listen the number 2 and Screams. Those will be out there as you're listening to this. So vote. But Ike, now we got that out of the way. Now it's time to talk Scream, and we're going to dive into this first by playing Top 3.
Top 3.
And for this episode's top 3, as we talk about Scream and the Scream franchise, we're going to discuss what is an iconic piece of the Scream mythology, or the Scream, whatever you want to call it, the Scream franchise. It is going to be our top 3 favorite openings to Scream movies. The opening scenes, Ike, has become such an iconic part of Scream. Just right out of the gate, the first one. I mean, we're not going to talk about it, because we'll talk about it more, I'm sure, in our choices. But it set the bar. And it's every time a movie comes out in the Scream franchise, it's always fun to anticipate what's the opening scene going to be.
Yeah.
So let's get right to it. Before we dive into our choices, we did do a poll. Again, we've been all over the Twitter with the poll here lately.
I'm just now looking at this poll. I'm sorry. I'm looking at these percentages and I'm laughing.
That's all right. No surprises in my eyes.
Yeah, no.
But we're talking our favorites. So hey, what we pick. This had no influence on it, but we polled you guys on what your favorites of the Scream openings were. Coming in 5th was the 2022 Scream, had no votes. It was a 0%. Now, to be fair,
Not a
I am going to say this. I am going to say this. Twitter only allows you to put 4 choices up. So I put the first 4 movies, and I did put in there that if you wanted to pick the 2022 Scream, to put it in the comments. So the fact that it had no votes, it could have just been pure laziness on people's parts. Right? If it was in the poll, who knows what would happen? But again, you only have the choice to put 4. So, something had to give. But coming in at 4th with 2% was Scream 4. Again, we're not going to talk specifics on this because I don't want to spoil anything for our discussion. But coming in at 3, Scream 3 at 4%. Coming in second, Scream 2 with 14%. And running away with it at number 1 was the original Scream with 80%. Again, like I said, I don't want to talk specifics on this guy because we're getting ready to talk into our choices, and so we're going to hit probably some of these.
Yeah.
So let's dive right into it, Ike. Usually you start. I'll start this time. And again, this is tough to me, right? Because to varying degrees, I enjoyed all 5 openings. Like when we talk about our movie choices, it's tough because while maybe I can come up with a ranking, the gaps aren't that big, right? I enjoy all these movies. Obviously, there's varying degrees, but the gaps in my entertainment or my enjoyment is not that far fetched. And based on day, I mean, I've come up with my rankings. You could come in a week later and I could have completely different rankings just based on my mood. I mean, it could flip flop easily. In my top 3, my 1 and 2, this was probably the toughest it's ever been for me to determine which one was 1 and which one was 2. I knew what the 2 were.
Yeah.
They are so close that I feel like ranking them 1, 2 is almost unfair, and it's really a 1A, 1B for me. It really is, because we'll get to that. But at number 3 for me was indeed Scream 3 from 2000. That's the death of Cotton Weary in the opening. I know a lot of people knock this. A lot of people say it's a little boring. I enjoyed it. I think maybe one of the reasons I kind of liked it is because Cotton was kind of a important part of the story for the first 2 movies. Right. Well, maybe he wasn't a primary character. Just him in general was pretty important, right? The instigations of him murdering, Sydney's mom and everything that happened after that. Even on beyond it through the entire franchise, he's a very important character, despite what he has for screen time. But I just thought it was so humorous to me that here Cotton was this guy that had been accused of murder, and now he's a talk show host and he's got money. And it was just fun. And I don't know. I really enjoyed the opening scene for Scream 3. Ike, what, I don't want to really get into it because I don't know if it made your top 3.
Yeah. So it didn't. It did not make my top 3.
Okay. Well, there you go. Then tell me what you think, though, of the Scream 3 opening. Again, for me, all 5 of them are pretty close.
Oh, yeah.
And any one of them could have slipped in there. So what do you think of the Scream 3 opening?
So there's 5 movies. So if I had to put it in a ranking, it would probably be my least favorite opening. And it's not because it's not good. I do agree. I didn't really have much of a connection to Cotton Weary as a character. I thought he was an interesting plot device in the first 2 movies. But honestly, had they just sent him to the background or kept him around for a reoccurring role or something like that as an advisor in later movies, I probably would have enjoyed that more. I do like Liev Schreiber, the actor who played Cotton Weary, but specifically the opening of the 3rd movie, I wasn't like, yeah, this is the best thing ever. But I also wasn't like, oh, it's the worst thing ever. I did enjoy it. And I wouldn't even say it's boring per se. I just it didn't strike with me like the other ones did.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people say it's their least favorite, but to me, even you say again with these five, even the least favorite,
Yeah,
that doesn't mean it's bad.
exactly.
I enjoyed them all. None of them are bad, and so then moving on, Ike, what is your number 3 favorite opening to a Scream movie?
Absolutely. My number 3 favorite is Scream 2, the Scream 2 opening. The Scream 2 opening, iconic. I mean, you have not only do you have two very, very interesting kills. I think one of the first one where he's killed through the bathroom stall. Super interesting. The second one, she's killed in a literal movie theater about the movie Stab, right? In internal movie Stab. And so I think if I had watched this in a movie theater, it would have been even more impactful because you're in a movie theater watching a person in a movie theater watch Scream 1 basically getting murdered while watching it.
Yeah,
But absolutely, Scream 2 had a really cool opening, very meta, very interesting, very Wes Craven-esque. And
yeah.
definitely it's great. I wish I could have put it higher, but yeah, Scream 2 is super fantastic, super fun.
Yep, I'm going to refrain from discussing it yet because it will come back up. So, and I guess that's going to spoil everything here because I'm telling you, mine's surprising. It's going to surprise some people, but this is
Really.
my favorites, my enjoyable. My number two favorite opening to a Scream movie is the first one from Scream 1996. And again,
Same.
they're so damn close.
Yep.
It's whatever else, but um, there is no bones about it. The first one is absolutely iconic. It everything about it just it blows you away because you had Drew Barrymore, who is a huge star, who was cast in this movie originally to play Sidney Prescott.
Yep.
That's what she was cast for. That's what sold the movie is her involvement, and then she chose to play this because of the shock value. She went to Wes Craven and thought, hey, this would be fun. This would be, and she was dead on right. There is, maybe you can, if you dig deep enough, maybe you can come up with something. But I am hard pressed to say that at 1996, at that point, you'd be very hard to find a movie that had kind of an opening kill sequence like that made you go, whoa, more than this one. Because literally, if you see a movie come up and you see Drew Barrymore on the screen, you're thinking, oh, you're automatically assuming, hey, she's a major character in this movie.
Yeah.
And she's clearly not. But the whole scene is so great. I love the kill. I mean, there's all the cliches that became iconic for the Scream franchise. This is where they started, right? The phone call, the trivia questions, the catchphrases and the questions. But one thing that seals this for me, I absolutely get chills still to that part where the parents come home and they're trying to find her and they pick the phone up to call the police and they can hear her.
Yeah.
The mom can hear her on the phone trying to gasp and that to me is so cool, so well done. And it's so clever. Just love it. So I'm guessing this is probably got to be one of your top 2, right?
Yep. It was my number 2 as well, actually.
Okay. All right. Well, there you go.
So yeah, my number 1's going to be very shocking, I think. But yeah, my number 2 was also Scream. I should say the original Scream. It was one of those things where, as a young viewer of horror, when I got around to watching the first Scream movie, that kind of scene sticks with you. And you're right, you'd be incredibly hard pressed to find a opening sequence in any genre that has the level of impact and the level of cultural relevance that Scream had and has. I mean, the movie Scream has had such a paramount, and I mean absolutely incredibly large and broad effect on not only the horror genre, but other genres, adjacent to it. And this scene, it is the pinnacle. It is a work of art. And in a lot of ways, I feel like a lot of people, when they watch Scream, this is their first introduction to what they're about to watch. And even beyond this, in the years that have passed, I mean, that opening scene has brought up so much speculation about the movie. Because as we all know in Scream, the killers are Stu Macher and Billy Loomis. The opening scene is one of the most highly debated scenes of all time because they're trying to figure out who killed Casey Becker. Is it both of them? Is it one of them? Were they both there? Were they both not there? You know? So, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, hey, let's discuss this a little bit. Again, give it context. This is 1996, right? There is not this overabundance of internet, right? No one's got their internet at their phone, at their fingertips. You have a movie that you're going to see. It's a horror movie, and you see the list of people that are in this movie, and you see Drew Barrymore. You're automatically going to assume major character, right? It's Drew Barrymore. She's the biggest name in this movie at that time, right? And that's no offense to anybody else, but come on. I mean, and when you see it, I'd be hard pressed to think that anybody that went into it thought she was getting killed right off the bat.
Oh no,
it's just unbelievable. Now, to your point on the debate on who killed her, right? There is the scene later when they're all sitting around, right? Doesn't Stu say something about how he used to date Casey, right?
Yeah, it is often believed that Stu Macher was the one that killed her.
Yeah, that's always been my assumption because of that, because that was the ex that I think, does he not hint that she cheated on him with someone, the football guy that gets killed in the scene, or not cheated but left him for, or whatever you want to call it. So again, there's no proof, right? There's nothing was ever revealed, but yeah, it was always my assumption that it was Stu because he had the motive for it. But you know, who knows? Hey, they're buddies. Maybe Billy thought, hey, I'm gonna take this girl out for you, right? You never know, right? I mean, Billy could be that kind of friend. I mean, come on. So
he's best friends, man. Best friends forever.
Could be BFFs. They might have had the heart penance. Each of them had a half. And whatever. Who knows? But so that brings us to number one, and I mentioned it or whatever else. My number one is from 1997. It is Scream 2. It is the deaths of Maureen and Phil in the theater. And I don't know what it is about this scene. This scene I absolutely freaking love. This movie has so much energy, so much excitement. It's so clever. I can tell you, I know it ain't going to happen because, again, I know there's a different context in the world today, number one. And I know it's not going to happen. But I'm going tomorrow night, as we record this, I'm going to see this movie. Man, if I went in and there's a bunch of people running around in costume with glow-in-the-dark masks, I would be like, hell yeah, this is fun. I love the vibe, the energy, how these people are all excited to see this movie, how they're cheering, because I've been in movies like that, right, in the past, where people have cheered and been excited about things, and that's fun, right? That makes the whole experience that much fun. And then, again, like you mentioned, the Phil getting killed in the bathroom stall, being stabbed through man, that's a great kill. That is a great, great kill. And the Ghostface putting the jacket on, going back in the theater, and then literally just stabbing her right there, and it blending in, right, because of all the chaos and hoopla that's going on until she climbs up on the stage. That whole scene, I don't know, it is so fun to me. It is everything that I like. And again, I know there's a lot of cheese involved in this. And again, we've discussed it. I like cheese, right? It's fun to me. I've said it time and again. I like my horror with extra cheese, and but it's just so fun, right? And it sticks with you every time I see it. I still just chuckle and smile because it's I don't know, it's fun, right? And it really doesn't fit in a whole lot of context in the whole movie, right? Because these are just, I guess, people that just went to the college or whatever, right? But that's the way it is. But man, it was just I don't know, I love it. It was just fun. So, but again, you've already discussed the Scream 2 opening, Ike. So what is your, I think I probably have a guess, but what is your number one favorite opening to a Scream movie?
That would be none other than Scream numero quattro, number 4. And that will probably be surprising to a lot of people because they're thinking to themselves, well, Scream 4, it is by no means my favorite Scream movie. I do enjoy it. But the Scream 4 opening, it's honestly kind of funny. And
it is.
And it's just very enjoyable. For people who don't know, basically it is the opening of Scream 1, where they're basically showing they're like the stab version of Scream 1. and the two people who are watching it are, I believe, Lucy Hale and Kristen Bell.
Yeah.
Maybe Lucy Hale. I'm not 100% sure about that one.
I don't know.
But they're watching it, and basically Kristen Bell, like, the one girl's complaining about the, like, oh, that's so stupid, so stereotypical, blah blah blah,
Yeah.
and then Kristen Bell just reaches over and stabs her in the stomach.
Like, did you see that coming?
Right? Exactly. She's like, "Do you see that coming? Now shut up and watch the
You
movie."
talk too much.
Yeah. And I love Kristen Bell, and
Yeah.
it was so out of pocket, and like I really loved it. And then of course that's the opening of another Stab movie. It's like the opening of Stab 5 or something like that, and then it gets you to the actual cast of people who are watching this movie,
Yeah.
in
It's
the
like
movie.
a movie,
So
movie inside a movie inside the movie. It's
exactly, and it's clearly it's Wes Craven making fun of himself.
yeah.
Clearly.
Now
It-
this opening almost made my top 3 because that it is literally them, Wes Craven, Kevin Williamson, whoever else is involved in the writing or whatever else, poking fun at themselves, poking
100%.
fun at the franchise. And man, I like that, right? I like people, and especially people with celebrity status, because it's often lost with them, that ability to laugh at yourself, right? And the cliches. And it is. I agree with you. It's a fun opening.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, 100%. And it's one of those ones you wouldn't expect, and it's just chef's kiss.
Yeah. And again, like we discussed with the first one, right? These are some big stars at that time,
Yeah.
especially at that time, that are getting killed here. And but like I said, so neither one of us had the 2022 Scream opening in there. That's a
Yeah.
great opening too, which kind of was different, right? Because the character in the opening scene survived.
Didn't die. Yeah, they didn't die. Jenna Ortega
Yeah.
didn't die.
So
And I will
so it's
say
a
that
little
was my
different.
number 4. Yeah, that was my number 4. I will say, almost broke my number 3. But I don't know. There is a certain amount of like love for like somebody just dying in that opening scene. So
Yeah, it is.
I couldn't breach the top 3, but it was there 100%.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I didn't have 4 or the 5th movie in mind or whatever, but I love them too. I
Yeah.
love the openings too. They're all fun, and the thing is, they're all fun in their own way. None of them are just absolute cookie cutter molds of the previous one, where it gets kind of redundant and old. And that's part of the excitement. I cannot wait to see this new movie, to see what the opening sequence is like, and the opening scene, and to see what they do with it. It's a very exciting part of seeing these movies, is just that opening. I'm literally, we'll be lucky if I don't cheer out loud when that phone rings in that opening sequence, in that opening scene, right? Because it's happening.
Oh yeah.
Very exciting. So, all right. Well, that brings us to a conclusion on our top 3, our favorite openings of Scream movies. Hit us up on social media. Let us know what you like. I know you've all voted, but let's have some discussion on what your favorites are and why. So we're going to pause for a moment, and when we come back, we're going to have our review of the entire franchise and our ranking from 5 to 1 of the 5 existing Scream movies. So hang in there.
Remember, in the course of discussing movies, the host will spoil plots. You've been warned.
Okay, and we're back, and we are talking the Scream franchise as we prepare for the release of Scream 6 and our viewing. Now, we will have a review of Scream 6 in our next episode. We're going to talk in depth about Scream 6. Again, this is a movie we've been anticipating, we've been excited for. So we're very excited to discuss that next episode. But in this episode, we are discussing the 5 movies leading us to this one, and we're going to rank from 5 to 1 our favorites, right? These are not necessarily, again, as we always say, these aren't necessarily what we're saying are which one's best made, which one's best acted. This is just our what we like, our favorites, what we enjoy watching. And again, as I said earlier in the top 3, man, this is close because I like all 5.
Yeah.
Right? I enjoy watching all 5. This is one of those franchises that when I do rewatches, I don't really hit one where I'm like, oh God, I got to watch this one to get through the rewatch. Right? It seems like every franchise, there's one of those movies at least where it's like, I got to watch this one. I like watching all 5 of these. So, again, just because however we have them ranked doesn't mean we think any of them are necessarily bad. This is just the way we see it as our enjoyment. So let's dive right in. Let's start with what we feel is our number 5 favorite. It is from 2011. It is Scream 4. It was directed by Wes Craven, written by Kevin Williamson. produced by the Outer Banks Productions and distributed by Dimension Films. It starred Nev Campbell, David Arquette, Courtney Cox, Emma Roberts, Hayden Pitneri, Anthony Anderson, Allison Brie, Adam Brody, Rory Culkin, Muriel Jaffe, Eric Knudsen, Mary McDonald, Marley Shelton, Nico Tortorello. Oh, God, it's just a slew of people there, right, as all these are. It drew $97.2 million in the box office on a $25 million budget. That is good for the 84 spot in the 2011 box office releases. So this kind of underperformed from the previous movies. It wasn't as successful. It didn't gross as much, but it was still, I mean, we're still talking 4 times the payout on what the budget was.
Right.
The killers in this movie were Jill Roberts and Charlie Walker. Of course, Jill Roberts was it a cousin of Sidney Prescott?
It was.
Yeah, and again, this is the movie's not bad, but I think part of the problem is just, I don't know, it wasn't, in my eyes, quite as creative as some of the others. The approach of, the cousin, staging her own quote unquote movie and her own scenes and whatever, because she wanted the attention and the adulation that Sydney got, right? Because as she said, in her family and everywhere she went, it was always Sydney this and Sydney that, and she wanted some of that. To me, my favorite part of the movie though is Charlie and I can't remember his buddy's name off the top of my head now. The guy that was with him in the cinema club. I'll look it up here in a second. Those 2 guys to me were very entertaining in this movie. It was fun. Of course, the legacy characters, the original guys, Sydney, Gail, Dewey, they were all great, right? I mean, they're fun in all the movies and everything else. But I don't know, just overall, I don't know. It wasn't as shocking to me. I mean, to me, when I watched it, even the first time, pretty early on, I kind of thought that Charlie was one of the killers, that he had a part in this. It just kind of felt that way. Now, I think if I remember right, when I first watched it, I probably thought it was the 2 guys from the cinema club, both of them. And I didn't see the kind of the swerve with Jill, whatever, the geek getting the girl supposedly, and then Jill killing Charlie to be the final girl on her own. But again, it's still a fun movie. I still enjoy watching it. It's got some good performances in it. It's got some good lines in it. This is the one that introduced the Kirby Reed character. She was absolutely spectacular in this movie. To me, she's a standout. I love all of her lines. It's just it was just spot on. The way it was delivered felt so natural, and it was so much fun. So Ike, tell me a little bit what you think of Scream 4.
Absolutely. And the 2 characters that you're referencing, the 2 like kind of geeky characters, one of which is Rory Culkin, who plays Charlie Walker, and then the other one is Eric Knudsen, who plays Robbie Mercer.
Yeah, Robbie, that's it. Yeah, he was the guy that was pretty much webcasting the entire high school experience.
Yeah.
I can't. Oh, Hall Pass. This show was called Hall Pass. Yeah, so
Absolutely.
it was great.
No, yeah, and I would agree. Obviously, I really do like Scream 4. I don't think any of these, like you said, I don't like. But Scream 4 kind of is in the latter part of this list for the same reason that some of the later, Nightmare on Elm Street movies, they weren't as big of a success as some of the early ones. You know what I mean? And what I mean by that is that I feel like sometimes Wes Craven does this thing where I don't think he realizes he was doing it, but he just kind of started doing the same thing over and over and over again. And Scream 4 was sort of a symptom of that. They tried to kind of pull you back in by hitting you with doses of nostalgia. They did a lot of things in Scream 4 that they did in Scream 1 and 2. They had the film club at the high school, and they have the legacy characters coming back to play an important role. Nev Campbell goes back to her hometown to talk about a book and everything else. And outside of its opening scene, the rest of the movie is great, but none of it is so remarkable that it's super memorable, in my opinion.
Yeah.
There are some interesting parts. I thought it was really, honestly, kind of like, I mean, it's kind of messed up how far, the cousin was going to go to frame the other people. So that was a very interesting dynamic. But I felt like the whole one killer turns on the other killer was sort of overdone. I felt like that was obviously just supposed to be a touch base on the original Scream, where Billy kind of turns on Stu, and they basically did the same thing here. I was really hoping that Rory Culkin's character was going to be alive longer than than that last kill scene, but it is what it is. But the movie's not bad, but definitely not my favorite. Definitely not my favorite.
Yeah, and it, like I said, it winds up in the hospital, and the whole part of the hospital, and that's okay, but that almost felt like putting a hat on a hat a little bit to me. I think I would have almost wished they had wrapped it in the house somehow. I don't know. I mean, not that the hospital, there's the whole thing with the at the end of the defibrillator or whatever, the clear part. It's a little corny, and everything else. I mean, again, Scream's known. Whatever. It's known for a little bit of that cheese and corniness, but that's a little much. But
a little too much mozzarella on that pizza.
Yeah. Now I will say the hospital part. I do like the part where Gail figures out kind of who it is because of the gunshot, the wound in her shoulder. When they say that Dewey says that Jill asked how her said they have matching scars, and and Gail's kind of chuckles, is like, wait a minute, how'd she know I got shot in the shoulder? And then it clicks in Dewey to go and Jill's part of this. So again, it's a fun movie, but if you got to rank them, something's got to be at the bottom. So and unfortunately, it falls on that one. So I go ahead and carry us on to our number 4 favorite in the Scream franchise.
Absolutely, numero cuatro. I just like saying quattro. Number 4 is Scream 3.
It's like the second time you've said it in the movie or in this episode.
I have quattro. But
go ahead though. Scream 3.
Scream 3 from 2000, of course, directed by Wes Craven, written by Aaron Kruger. Yeah, Aaron. About said Ethan. Production company was Conrad Productions and Craven / Madalena Films. Distributed by Dimension Films, of course. Starring none other than David Arquette, Nev Campbell, Courtney Cox, Parker Posey, Patrick Dempsey, Scott Foley, Lance Henriksen, Matt Kiesler, Jenny McCarthy, Emily Mortimer, Dion Richmond, and Patrick Warburton. Box office $161.8 million. Budget was a cool $40 million, and it was number 22 in the 2000 box office releases. Immediately off the bat, we talked about it earlier. Scream 3 had a interesting opening with Cotton Weary, the supposed killer of Nev Campbell, Sidney Prescott's mom in the original film. Maureen. And Cotton Weary dies. Cotton Weary, obviously not my favorite character. I mentioned this, but he had a very important role to play, and they set him up pretty well in this opening scene, killed him off, and then basically got us right into the meat of the action. You know what I mean? The killer's back, and the killer's going straight for Sidney. No holds barred. And the entire film, I mean, it ends up obviously with an interesting twist. We learned that Maureen Prescott was actually an actress. She was in Hollywood, and she was taken advantage of in Hollywood, which led her to leave Hollywood for a more simple life. Scream 3 depicted some very interesting imagery, such as Sidney seeing her dead mom and being haunted by her. And it had some other interesting, things that kind of popped up here and there. Ultimately ending in a battle in a mansion where we learn that the killer is none other than Sidney's half-brother, who was born out of a very unfortunate, situation.
Yep.
And
Roman
Roman, and he was also a architect of Maureen Prescott's demise in the original film. So, very interesting movie. I feel like a lot of backtracking kind of happened in this movie to kind of make it fit in and make sense. But nonetheless, it was a pretty solid Scream movie. A lot of great kills, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it is a creative movie, right? Because we do hear in the first couple movies, right, a lot of people talking about Maureen Prescott and how she was, quote unquote, a whore, and she was a home wrecker, and that. And this movie doubled down on that, right? And then it had showed that she was, seeing lots of people. It even had, where Roman had kind of, he tracked her down and followed her and filmed some things, her meeting with some of these guys, one of them being Cotton, and And then so it's you know, I like that it pulled that aspect, right? That's a clever approach. So it does make it kind of believable that there was something that instigated this in there. What's interesting is it really hit on a lot of, later the Harvey Weinstein thing
Yeah.
and whatever else, which obviously Weinstein had a part in the early Scream franchise. And this it kind of brought to light some of those things in Hollywood that would later really come to light. But it played on that, and then, but it is an interesting movie, and it's the first of the three out of the first three, not really primarily written by Kevin Williamson. I believe that he was very involved in a lot of other projects, a lot of other things, and I think he had a lot of notes, outlined ideals for this, but they ultimately brought in another writer to help him, pretty much finish it out and do it. So yeah, but again, it's still a fun movie. I have really not any complaints in it per se. I think it has a clever approach. I like them diving into the Hollywood. Some of the aspects with the stab movie and each of the characters having their Hollywood counterparts is kind of humorous.
Yeah.
Parker Posey, playing the stab version of Gale Weathers has some humorous points. So, again, not a bad movie, but when you take it all into context, right? Something's got to be at the bottom, towards the bottom here, right? Something's got to fall in four. And unfortunately, and again, I got mad love for that first three, the original trilogy. But in context, something's got to fall. So it is
It's
Scream 3.
I was gonna say it's interesting because in Scream 3, Jay and Silent Bob also have a cameo.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right. As does Wes Craven,
yep,
right? And
Wes
that's in that
Craven
same, yeah,
and Carrie Fisher too.
and Carrie Fisher. That's correct. Yeah, and yeah, and stuff like that's fun to me, right? It's
Oh
all
yeah.
right. I like that. It fits right into horror movies. I don't have any issue with that kind of stuff. Um, and again, I love Jane Silent Bob, so seeing them in it's kind of makes me chuckle every time I see it.
No,
So
yeah, I was gonna say that was probably one of my biggest, not one of my biggest positives, but it was kind of fun to see like different people that you wouldn't normally see, and you wouldn't normally see Jay and Silent Bob in a horror movie. So it was cool to be able to
yeah,
be like, oh hey, I know those guys.
yeah, it does make you wonder, right? They're because they're touring the studio, right, in the lot when they're there. So it does make you wonder in the context of the View Askew universe, is that the time when, from Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back or whatever, where they're going to stop the Jay or Black Man and Chronic movie? If that's the course why that's why they're there, it's interesting to at least for me, to think about that stuff in the overlap in the intersection there.
You're over here like, okay, how do these movies fit together canonically?
That's right. I like timelines and I like
Is Dante Ghostface?
could be right. I mean, come on. But all right, that takes us to our number 3 favorite of the Scream franchise from 1997, Scream 2. Directed by Wes Craven, written by Kevin Williamson. The production company was Conrad Productions and Craven Madalena Films. Distributed by Dimension Films, starring David Arquette, Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Jamie Kennedy, Laurie Metcalf, Jerry O'Connell, Elisa Neal, Timothy Oliphant, Jada Pinkett, and Liev Schreiber. It grossed $172.4 million in the box office on a $24 million budget. That is good for the number 17 movie in the 1997 box office releases. Well, excuse me. And what's fun to think in this, right? This movie is released in 97. We're going to talk here in a minute here in a bit about the original Scream, and there's an interesting point to bring up about the where they ranked in the box office releases for that year. In a note, like I said, this movie was 17th in 1997. The first Scream was number 18 in 1997, coming in one spot below Scream 2 because Scream was released. The original Scream was released in December, so a lot of its box office was actually in 1997. So we'll talk more about it, but it's wild to me to think in 1997 there were 2 Scream movies at 17 and 18 on the highest grossing movies of the year. Again, this is a fun movie. What do you think of Scream 2?
Oh, absolutely. Scream 2, it's a really interesting paradigm because a lot of times when you make a sequel to a movie, the sequel's not very good.
Yep.
And there are very few exceptions to this rule in the horror movie universe. And obviously, Scream
As
2
they
is not
discuss in the movie, right? There's a whole scene where they discuss sequels.
100%. There is the film scene at the college where they're talking about good sequels. And honestly, it's a very interesting discussion. It's an interesting discussion that I've myself have had before with my friends and my wife. So it's a very interesting dynamic where not only are they talking about sequels in the movie, this is a sequel. This is a sequel to a very popular movie, and they're trying to find a way to make the movie different, but also still remain a Scream movie and a Scream franchise. So, for people who don't know, obviously this movie takes place where Sidney Prescott's trying to move on with her life. She goes to college. We talked about the opening scene in the movie theater. It was Dave's number one. It was my number three. Great opening scene. Starts you off on a very high note. But Sidney Prescott's trying to live a normal life. She's trying to get back to normal. But of course, people find her and they call her and they're like, "Ooh, what's your favorite scary movie?" And but she's starting to kind of become a little hardened, right? We see a very secluded, a recluse Sidney Prescott in the third movie. And the fourth movie is kind of about her coming out of her shell, right? In the fourth movie, she's like sort of trying to she's sort of coming back to reality. She wrote her book. She's kind of recovering from her trauma. Number three was she's completely reclused. She's working as a domestic violence advocate via phone in the middle of the mountains. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And two is sort of the lead up to that. You know what I mean? She had just gone through the traumatic events of the first movie, and she's trying to get back to normal life by going to college. And unfortunately, it doesn't work. A whole slew of events happen, and we eventually find out that the killer of this movie is none other than Billy Loomis's absent mother, which I would never have seen in a million years. This is one of very surprising twists. So not only was it Billy Loomis's absent mother, it was also a somebody who was thought to have been a friend. It was, I can't remember the guy's name, but it's played by Timothy Olyphant.
Yeah,
um, Mickey, who is just a deranged psychopath who wants to be famous as a serial killer. And him and Billy Loomis's mother teamed up to basically take down Sidney Prescott because Billy Loomis's mother was basically blaming Sidney for Billy being a serial killer, for being a monster, when in reality, statistically, it was probably her fault.
Yeah, I love. There's so many points in this that I love. And I love the fact that she entered herself into it, right, as a reporter, Debbie Salt, and she was there through the entire movie, right, playing this other character. I love that this hits on some real world things and some hot button type topics, right? Because she says that, right? I'm so tired of them blaming the parents for what they do, right? But at the same token, where she's sitting here and defending her son, right? My son, almost like her son's the victim and all this, right? And this and everything else. Clearly, she had this mindset that the movies has helped turn him, right? And that part of it, that's a hot button thing. And I love how Mickey parlays this at the end, right? That he's that part where he's like, you know what? It's not about the kills anymore. It's not about the crimes. Now it's all about the trial, right? Because that's a thing, right? And he's like, oh, he's like, whatever, Al Gore or whoever, he said, will speak on, in my defense, and the Christian Coalition will pay for my lawyer expenses and everything else, because he had the mindset that he could do all this, parlay it into fame, parlay it that I was the victim, right? That Hollywood and the movies twisted me into this killer and influenced me. And so and this is all real world type stuff that's very debatable. Oh, yeah. And it's very, sparks discussions and everything else on what it is. And like you said, right, at this point, she's not completely gone from the real world yet, right? Everything happened in the first one, yes, right? There is, but in her mind at this point, man, that's a one-off thing, right? There's these two crazy-ass people, and this happened. Never in a million years would you ever think, oh, this is going to be a slew of stuff and copycats and what have you. In her mind, they're dead, and it's over. And now I can breathe and I can be my thing. The boyfriend was a little cheesy in the movie. I think they tried to they tried to kind of be a little heavy-handed with it, kind of wanting you to believe that he's one of the killers.
Yeah.
And it didn't So it felt very much like a red herring. I never truly bought that it tried to seem a little too obvious. And I'm glad they didn't. They could have pulled the switch on you where he actually was. But it is a fun movie. One thing we talked about Scream 3. One thing, backtracking a little, we didn't discuss in the original take on Scream 3. I know we're going back to our previous discussion.
Yeah.
Stu Macher was supposed to be the killer, one of the killers in that movie. He was supposed to have returned to lead a group of students as killers and whatever else. All this was happening in kind of the wake of the Columbine shootings,
Right.
and they really thought that was probably correctly so. It was in bad taste, and they probably should change their direction a little bit. So that kind of shelved the Stu return. I kind of wish maybe they had just kind of reworked it and still went with Stu, but just maybe maybe just him personally in a more revenge-driven angle. Again, as I've said before, every movie I'm clamoring for Stu to return. I don't know whether it'll ever happen, but again, back to Scream 2. It is a fun movie. While it follows a lot of the foundation set by the first one, it kind of blazes its own path, right? It feels like when you place one and two together, it's almost like it's a one big movie, right? It's a continuation. It's not like just completely riding on the coattails of the first one. It's like a continuation of the story, a very natural kind of continuation. One thing that I always found humorous too is with Billy's mom coming back as a killer. Pretty early on in the movie, I believe it's when Randy and Dewey are sitting discussing who the killer could be, and Randy's telling some of the rules of the sequels and everything else. He mentions Pamela Voorhees and how she was a great killer because no one suspected this and that and whatever, almost foreshadowing that the mom being, I like when they do that a lot. There's a lot of nods to other movies in these and other horror movies, but it's almost, there's a lot of things in these where they kind of put things in there to tip their hand with, but you're not aware of it, right? Have you heard of the plaid theory in these movies? People have noticed that through many of the movies, there are at least scenes where the eventual killer wears a plaid shirt of some sort. And there's a whole, you can look at it. There's a whole, I don't know if it's not necessarily all of them, but there's many of them that have, right? And so it holds water. Now, is it intentional? Is it put in there? Maybe, probably, right? And so we'll discuss it more in a bit because we're going to discuss Scream 6. There is one of the new characters in Scream 6 who, in one of the scenes in the trailer, has a jacket where there's plaid, like a plaid lining showing. So people have often wondered, is it one of the killers? Or have they now, understood that people have caught on to this, so now they're put the red herring in to kind of flip the script on them. I kind of think it's a later, but anyway. I mean, there's lots of things like that, right? Where they plant things that when you go back at subsequent viewings, you see things that are like, there's some clues there that you don't really catch maybe in the first viewing, right? Where it's a lot of times these movies are a little deeper than what you take them for in their first viewing, right? I mean, there's a lot more there that once you know the full story and who the eventual killer is, you kind of see a lot more the next time you watch it. So.
No, absolutely.
All right.
And I would say before we move on, I was going to mention just briefly because I forgot to mention him, and when we were talking about 3, Jamie Kennedy's character, Randy Meeks, he is in this movie. He unfortunately dies in Scream 2, but he also was in Scream 3 briefly as a videotape. His sister, which I cannot remember her name.
I don't remember that.
She basically comes to the set with a videotape from Randy, who basically is, he made a videotape just in case he died and just in case Ghostface came back again. And he's talking about the rules of the trilogy. Yeah. Well, in this movie, he's talking about the rules of a sequel. In the first movie, he's talking about the rules of horror movies. So Randy is super great. And the next movie I'll mention that again. But,
that thread's still there. Yep. So go ahead, Ike. What is our number 2 favorite in the Scream franchise?
Absolutely. It is Scream from 2022. You heard that right. Scream, technically 5 from 2022, is our number 2. So this is directed by Matt Bettinelli Olpin and Tyler Gillett. or Gillette maybe. Writer is James Vanderbilt and Guy Busick. Production company is Spyglass Media Group, Project X Entertainment, and Radio Silence Productions. It is distributed, of course, by Paramount Pictures. And starring Melissa Barrera, Kyle Gallner, Mason Gooding, Mikey Madison, Dylan Minnette, Jenna Ortega, Jack Quaid, Jasmine Savoy Brown, and Sonia Amar, with Marley Shelton, Ski Ulrich, Roger R. Jackson, Heather Matarazzo, Courtney Cox, David Arquette, and Nev Campbell. Box office $140 million on a $24 million budget, and was number 25 in the 2022 box office releases. Wow. So,
Yeah.
Scream 5.
One name that popped up, well, just briefly, one name that popped up there, it's the first time we mentioned it. We probably should have mentioned it earlier. Roger L. Jackson, right? We mentioned that name's mentioned there. That's the voice, right? That is the voice of Ghostface. That's the voice you hear, right? That iconic voice. Roger Jackson's the guy that does that through these movies. So we should have mentioned his name earlier, but yeah, we finally got him in there. But he sticks around. And yes, heard correctly, Skeet Ulrich, right? Skeet Ulrich, Billy Loomis, making a comeback in this. Ike, tell us about that.
Absolutely. So for people who have not seen Scream 5, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of some of the important points to keep in mind with this movie. This movie is operating on what are called the requel rules. When we say requel, you're probably saying, what the hell does that mean? Basically, this movie is playing off of the fact that other movies have gotten remake sequel type movies such as Halloween, which sort of retconned some of the things that happened in previous movies and made a new sequel remake type deal. Now, without the retcon, this is, of course, a requel to the original series. Scream 5, of course, follows a sister duo, which is Jenna Ortega and Melissa Barrera's characters. Jenna Ortega.
The Campbell sisters, isn't that right?
You are correct. I could not remember their names, but they are named Campbell. But of course, Jenna Ortega is, most known, I would say, now for her work on Wednesday. But of course, this movie follows a brand new slate of people who are related to the original legacy cast. Not all of them, of course, but quite a few of them. We learn over time that Melissa Barrera is, of course, none other than the illegitimate daughter of Billy Loomis. And she is mentally unwell. She has, some issues that she's dealing with, and she sees the ghost or, a vision of her dead father, Skeet Ulrich. Now, this movie, of course, follows a lot of the same things that you see in other movies. It has some pretty, I would say, major deaths in this movie. Namely, unfortunately, Dewey dies in this movie, which is probably the biggest death in the entire Scream franchise, if you ask me. And of course, our other legacy characters are put in peril. Gail Weathers and Sidney Prescott are both shot and or stabbed. And basically, what this movie is about fans not liking how previous movies have been made. So this movie addresses how, as fandoms, we sometimes get a little crazy when movies don't go the way we want them to go. And this movie is literally about two people from the Stab fandom who want to remake the Stab movies. They want to remake the last movie that was made because it was so bad. They hated it. And they start setting up all this really elaborate thing. I don't remember the characters' names, but Melissa Barrera's character, she's the older sister, Billy Loomis's daughter.
Yeah, that's Sam.
Her boyfriend is one of the killers who specifically, Richie, who specifically suck her out in an attempt to find a relationship with her to get her back to their hometown, Woodsboro.
Yeah.
And Jenna Ortega's friend, which again I'm drawing a really big gap on her name, Amber, is the other killer who is also just crazy and who wanted to remake the movies. So it's this really interesting long con that they've created in an attempt to basically remake the last Stab movie because they didn't like it. And it honestly is a very interesting introspective of fandoms in general. So I think I've rambled on long enough. So Dave, tell us what you thought about this movie.
It plays into one of the strengths of the Scream movies, right? There is definitely a finger on the pulse of the entertainment industry. And this is a very real thing, right? It touches on toxic fans, and it touches on fans who almost entitled, right? And there are fans out there who get rabid about things and who believe that, you ruin franchises or you ruin whatever by doing certain things, and you're shitting on my movies and this and that. And that's what they talk about. That they're like, hey, we're just providing new source material so that next time they can get it right, right?
Yeah.
That they can, here it is. This is good. They can't screw this one up, right? If they make it, when they make the next one, man, this is good. And it is interesting. There's so many. There's a lot of cool things in this. Dewey pretty much first act of the movie calls out one of the killers.
Yeah.
Right? Literally, when they come to see him, he's like, "Hey, who's your boyfriend there? How long you known him?" Right? And he's like, "Hey, I was wherever in California or whatever when she was." Yeah, I'm sure you were conveniently out of the room when the second attack occurred, right? And literally right off the bat, and Richie says that later. It's like, dude, the deputy or the sheriff guy called it out. He nailed it early on, and no one listened. And it's so that's humorous to me, right?
Yeah.
And what this movie has a lot. There's a lot about kind of relationships in it, right? Because if you look at the Scream movies thus far, in these 5, you see how the Gail Sidney relationship has grown and changed, right? Because in the initial, they hated each other, right? Gail was ruining Sidney's life because Sidney thought Cotton killed her mom, and it was a done deal. It was a science deal. But Gail stirred the pot and said, "Hey, I don't think it's him," and wrote books and this and that. And then they survived the trauma, get to the second one. So, okay, there's a little something there, right, for a relationship. But then in the second one, Gail still kind of got some self-motivation, right? She shoves Cotton at Sidney to do that face-to-face confrontation and get it on video and get that hot thing. And but you see how it grows. And in this movie, you can see how they've come full circle and they're close, right? They've survived all this stuff. They're very, very close. And what really kind of seals the deal is the death of Dewey, right? This guy that was obviously was Gail's, love, was like Sidney's big brother.
Yeah.
And when they lost him, I mean, it's like, okay, it's just us now, right? We're the two. And I mean, I believe there was even a scene where when they're both injured and they team up to take someone down together using what's still left of their strong arms or whatever it is. And it's just, I think it's stuff like that to show the unity, right? Show how together they are. And then in that same token, you see the Carpenter sisters who were very close, but then Sam discovered this bad secret about herself. And in an effort to protect her little sister, she thought, I've got to get away, right? I can't put this on her. I can't bring what might come from this on her. So she runs away, and through this whole process, ends up causing her parents to split up because the dad didn't know. And while she's yelling at her mom, dad overhears. So it really sets off this slew of things. And then in the end is thinking, well, my sister probably hates me now because all this happening, there's nothing there. And then come to find out that's not true, right? And they're very close, and finds out that the younger sister was hurt when she took off, and they come back together, and they're I won't leave your side again, right? I'm always going to be here to help you, protect you. And so there's a lot of parallel stories, I think, going on there with the two of them,
Right.
the two pairs. And again, this is, to me, is part of that passing of the torch from the legacy characters in the original to the new. One can argue that Sidney and Gail have grown into almost a sister-like relationship, and now here are these actual sisters. There's parallels there, and it's kind of passing and establishing these new characters who, I've got to say, obviously, I'm sure there was obvious, they knew how talented some of these actors were and actresses were, but they hit the jackpot on the casting, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because it's much like a lot of movies, they cast these people, they were great, but then they even did bigger things after, which made it their part in the Scream franchise even more, incredible. I mean, now Jenna Ortega has got huge name value now, partially because of the Scream, but like you said, a lot of it's due to Wednesday. So now her coming in the Scream 6, it's a new level of, right, that the fact that she's in the movie. But again, it is a fun movie. I do like that long con, like you said, right? That Amber and Richie were a thing. And Richie went out there and, he makes it out. He's like, hey, it wasn't hard to get you back here. Almost as easy it was to get in your pants and things like it. Just that total, like, I didn't give two craps about you. This was all just a ploy. And that adds that whole evil layer, right, to it. And, and of course, I mean, Jack Quaid's great, right? I mean, again, another actor who was in this movie and then went on to do The Boys, which has been huge. So now, the fact that he was in this Scream movie, it just seems all the bigger. And, but I mean, not saying, Jack Quaid had done big things before this, right? But still, but it's
not to disparage him.
yeah. I'm not saying that, but it's, it's a fun movie. It's a weird position to try to do this requel thing, and it's a tricky thing. And one thing they did though, they didn't completely scrap everything before it, right? They didn't really get rid of anything. They just kind of took another level to it, another layer to it. And it was fun, right? I enjoyed it. I was excited for it. I enjoyed the movie. I didn't really feel it's hard with the killer thing in these, right? Because you want something over the top. You want something dramatic, right? You want someone to be the killer that's huge and impactful. And everybody clamors for returning characters, this and that. And it's kind of hard, right? It's hard at this point to get that huge shock value. I don't think Amber being a killer was probably that big a surprise when you look at it in retrospect, right? Member of the friend group. She had a little bit of an attitude. But to me, the Richie part, that was kind of a whole kind of moment. The fact that, for the whole time he was involved. So I thought that was kind of a good twist. So, but again, it was a fun movie. It sparked off what is this new trilogy, right? With essentially it being 5, 6 getting ready to come out. There's going to be a 7. And what's, obviously sealed the deal that it was a huge success. And it showed that, hey, man, this Scream franchise has still got very strong legs. And
absolutely.
So, but again, we have clamored, and we have still got to talk about our number 1. And so again, if you're keeping track, number 1 from 1996, the very first Scream. I mean, how can you go with anything different? Come on.
Of course.
Directed by Wes Craven, written by Kevin Williamson, produced by Woods Entertainment, and distributed by Dimension Films, starring David Arquette, Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, Matthew Lillard, Rose McGowan, Skeet Ulrich, Jamie Kennedy, and Drew Barrymore. It had a box office of $173 million on a $15 million budget. In 1996, the year of release, it actually ranked 74. But again, it was released on December 20th, right at the end of the year. And so when you carry over to what it drew going into 1997, it was 18 in 1997. So that's what we talked about earlier. Why, when you look at the 1996 ranking, you think, oh, that seems low or whatever else. That's because the bulk of that box office fell into 1997.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, of course, as we've talked, everybody knows the killers in this were Billy Loomis, Stu Macher. I mean, I don't want to talk too much about this because what can you say, right? Everybody knows. It laid the blueprint. It laid the foundation. It rejuvenated the horror genre at that time. There was a whole slew of movies that came after it because of this success. A lot of good movies that came because of this success that probably wouldn't have even got the opportunity to be made. And it brought a new dimension, and it showed that Wes Craven, if you didn't already know, which I don't know how you wouldn't, man, Wes Craven was a powerhouse. And it established Kevin Williamson as a writer, and it was clever, it was humorous, it had a great cast, it was a fresh take at horror. I mean, again, the word that always pops to mind, I've just said it is so clever, right? The way it was done. I mean, it paid tribute to horror in the genre in so many ways, through the quotes and the movie fans and the homages and some of the things, and it I mean the motives behind the killing were great, and man, it was just to me there's not a flaw to this movie, and it's just so many funny things to talk about. I mean, most of these actors and actresses were not anywhere near the first choices. Right. I mean, they wanted Affleck to play the Billy part. Some other people, they got down the list before they got to some. I mean, Matthew Lillard, I think he just got spotted by someone on the production team, on set or on studio or in the studio grounds, and they're like, "Hey, you look perfect for this." And I've heard Matthew Lillard say, I came in and did this movie. I was like 90 pounds. I was scrawny. I spit through the whole movie, and I had this huge vein popping out in my forehead that was frightening. He's like, "How did I ever work in Hollywood after this?" And it's just, I don't know. It's one of those, as a lot of great movies or iconic movies, just all the pieces just fell right into place.
Yeah.
And it just worked out, and everything clicked. It's hard to believe. It would be hard to think if some of these other actors and actresses that had these roles, what it would have, no disrespect to them, but would it have worked right? I don't know. Affleck as Loomis, I don't know about that. If Drew Barrymore had stayed on in the role of Sydney, I don't know. I mean, again, no disrespect, but it feels different going that route. Yeah. And I don't know that it would have. I don't know. I mean, it still would probably been a good movie, but would have been as impactful. I don't know.
Absolutely. Obviously, like you said, there's not much you can say about Scream 1 other than this is a iconic, this is a paramount, I would say it's one of the more important horror films of our generation. There's so much that can be said about this movie and Wes Craven, but it's all been said before, so I don't want to draw too much. But I do want to mention one thing. Now that we talked about all the movies, have you ever heard the grief theory about Sidney Prescott's character?
I don't know. Explain that to me.
So there's a theory. You've always heard the concept of grief. Grief comes in different stages. Yep. Depending on who you believe, there's either 5 or 7, but there's a concept of a 7-stage grieving process, which is shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, testing, and acceptance. A lot of people think that the 5 Scream movies that have come out so far are the stages of grief for Sidney Prescott. So you have the first film, which would be shock and denial. She's very clearly, this film has shocked, not the events of this film have obviously shocked her to her core. She was, in denial about her relationship with Billy Loomis, and Billy Loomis being this monster who killed her mother. And so basically shock and denial is what the first movie is about. It's about the shock. It's about Sidney Prescott not being able to accept what has happened to her. And then you have the third movie, which is the second movie, which is anger and bargaining. She is angry. She's angry that she's had to go through this. She even talked to, when she was talking to Dewey when he had visited her, she's not okay. Clearly she's not okay. And bargaining, she's begging for a normal life. That's all she wants. She just wants a normal life. This is all she needs. Just please, I want a normal life. And then we move on to number 3. Number 3 is depression. She's given up at this point. She's secluded herself in the woods, in the mountains. She's not even dealing with this shit anymore. She's just so over it. And then you have number 4, testing. She's testing the water. She's doing this book. She didn't want to come back to Woodsboro, but she's like, I'll give it a try. And then finally, acceptance. She is accepting her life. She's accepting her fate. She accepts who she is, and she's prepared. She comes back to Woodsboro packing a 9mm because she knows the shit's, backwards and sideways. She knows the shit's got nuts in it, man. She knows this stuff backwards and forwards. She's accepted her fate, and she's finally able to move on. She has kids. She has a family. And that is the grief theory, and after having talked about it to this extent, I do kind of believe it. I can see it. I can see exactly where it's coming from.
Yeah, it's interesting. It fits. That's intriguing. So interesting indeed. But again, I mean, the whole Scream franchise is a great story. If you all the way through, you take each movie separately is great. You take the 5 as a whole up to this point. It's one nice big story. It all fits together and it builds on. It's great. And that's part of the fun, right? We very quickly become invested in these characters through these movies, and that's what makes them, as a level, right? When you care, right? You care about these movies and these characters and what had happened. So, all right, we've rambled along. So let's pause for one moment. We'll come back and just very briefly, very quickly, we'll discuss Scream 6 and our predictions just a little bit and close out the show. Listen to Their Screams is now a Fangoria collaborator. Get 20% off your order at shop.fangoria.com by using the promo code LISTEN2SCREAMS at checkout. That is listen, the number 2, and screams. Or you can click the link in the show notes. Okay, and we're back here. Very quickly, Ike, we are on the early release day as this is being released for Scream 6.
Yes.
Let's talk. We're both going to be seeing it here shortly, right? And both excited. Both have been, anticipating this. We've avoided all the online rigaroo and everything else to try to get the full enjoyment out of this. Ike, tell me, what would you like to see, or what predictions do you have for Scream 6? Do you have anything that popped to mind?
Oh, 100,000%. Hell yeah. Okay. So I'm going to hit you with my first one. All right. So I brought up the grief theory for a reason. And I believe the reason that is important is because this movie, Neve Campbell's going to die. I know they said she's not in it. I'm firmly believing that it's a smokescreen. And I'm going to guess that either A, she is the opening kill scene, or B, she is going to come face to face with another prediction, Stu Macher is coming back in this movie. And here's my guess, and this is kind of related to Stu Macher. We saw a scene in the trailer where there's all these Ghostface like mannequins.
Yep.
And they're talking about it's a shrine.
Yep.
A lot of movies have done this before, and I think this movie can pull it off. This is going to be about the cult of Ghostface. Stu Macher is the head of the cult of Ghostface. The Ghostface has become an iconic entity. It has surpassed not only itself as an entity, but it has become this living organism. And I think that there's going to be a cult of Ghostface. I think Stu Macher is going to be at the head of it. And I think that and if Neve Campbell is not in this movie, I'm also convinced that Gale Weathers is going to die. But I think one of them have to die in order to make Stu Macher's return to the series and the franchise mean something. Because you killed Deputy Dewey, you know what I mean? You killed Dewey in the last movie, and it served a purpose. It served a purpose to say that no matter how prepared you are, you can still die. You know what I mean? Dewey is prepared. He had the gun. He had the bullets. He had the concept. He knew what he had to do, but it was not enough. He still hesitated, and he paid for it. That being said, there's got to be a death in this movie, and it's got to mean something. And I'm fully convinced that it's a cult of Ghostface. It's Stu Macher. I think that he's coming after the Sam, right? The older sister of Sam.
Yep.
I think he's coming after Sam because that's the next descendant of Billy Loomis. He wants her to take up the mantle, and it's going to be a whole story about that. And we see multiple Ghostfaces. We see one Ghostface that has like a really broken mask, like a really rundown and old age. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think that's Stu. So yeah, enough rambling, but those are my major predictions. Stu Macher is returning. Neve Campbell is either going to be the opening kill scene, or hopefully she's still in this movie to some degree, and either her or Gale Weathers is going to be deceased.
Well, here's the thing. I pretty much agree completely with those things. I have pretty much as a blanket since Scream 1 pretty much predicted and hoped Stu would come back in every movie.
Same.
So to me, it does make sense, right? There's clearly multiple killers. There's clearly something going on here where there is a worshiping or whatever it is of the Ghostface and the killings. I think they're heavily playing into the modern fascination with true crime.
Yeah.
Leaning into that again, pulse on society and entertainment. True crime's a big thing now. I think they're leaning into that. I think the multiple killers will pull from several movies and several of the characters, right? I'm predicting that I think we're going to have at least 3, maybe 4 killers in this movie.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that.
I think again, I will say it. I'll jump on board with you because I'm so hopeful. And again, we're either going to look like geniuses or ass clowns. That Stu is the primary, right? He's the big boss Ghostface in this. So we'll say that he is one, right? I believe that some new established character will be part of it and will be one of them, right? At least one. I'm going with 4. I'm going to say there's 4 Ghostface in this movie. So I will say that at least one of the 4, one Stu, one of them will be one of the new characters that's established in there that has become friends or associated with them or whatever the context is of them. I am going out on a limb, and I am going to say that Kirby Reed is one of the 4 killers.
Interesting.
I feel, and I'm saying this again. This could be a complete thing that we're going to joke about and laugh at me about next week. But the reason I say this is I feel like they've tried to plant hints with how she's dressed, right, in black and white in this, and I feel like in this shrine there's lots of things that would have come from evidence that would have been in police, whatever police belonging to the police. Kirby has already been established that she's in law enforcement in this.
Yeah.
So I feel like maybe that's the connection where how they came to get some of these things. So that might be a loose connection, but I'm going to say it because I don't see Kirby coming back to be a long-term thing here. I really don't. So I think she's coming back. I think she's going to be one. And then I think the fourth one I think will be one of the other new characters from the last movie. Probably, I'm going to guess probably one of the twins. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know which one. I don't know. I'm kind of indifferent. But I think there's that tie again, right? I mean, Randy was not necessarily part of the original killing. He was still friends with those two, and part of that friend group. So I feel like Stu would have lured at least one of those twins in as being as the niece and nephew of Randy, as to, hey, the connection to the father, and playing on that to keep this up or whatever else. We need an expert. Maybe it'll be the girl, because they need that. He needs that expert on board that knows the rules of horror, right, and knows those things. So again, that could all, who knows, right? Who knows? But that's what I'm calling it. I'm calling 4 ghost face killers. I'm saying it's going to be Stu, a newly established character, Kirby, and I'm just going to leave it with one of the twins, but I'm leaning towards the girl, the Savoy Brown character.
I think, I don't want to draw it out too much, but I that's honestly, I didn't even think of that, but that makes perfect sense, because if you think about like why Stu and Billy failed so hard is that they didn't align themselves with the proper rules. So in an effort to not fail again, Stu wants to bring somebody in with that experience, and the girl would make sense. She had pretty superficial wounds in the last movie. The killer wasn't super motivated to kill her, it didn't seem. Now, obviously, that could have been a fluke because there may have been no connection at all to those 2 killers. But it just seemed odd to me that her brother was so gravely injured, whereas she was pretty superficial, it seemed like. But that's besides the point. Anyway, continue.
So, again, it's all hearsay. Who knows, right? I mean, I can rationalize this in my head, but it could be completely 100% off, right? But that's what my gut's saying, and I'm sticking with it. I'm putting it out there just for fun. People can laugh at me afterwards if I'm completely wrong, whatever. But again, mark my words. That's what I'm saying. So if any of that's true, it's documented. It's the audio's recorded, and it'll be out there. So we'll see. Again, I'm hopeful that Stu's back, but every movie I want Stu back. I just feel I don't know. It feels I feel like there's just been some things. Right, there was the one poster that came out that mocked the New York subway system of all the killers and victims and things, and Stu's was a different color, right? There was that. Matthew Lillard has just been a little more visible recently, and doing interviews and different things discussing Scream in the last couple years. I don't know. But I'm one of those that sometimes I overthink and I try to look for stuff that may not be there, but then it just feels that this time.
Well, I was going to say, and obviously I know that it's like, I don't know. I talked to you guys last time about the panel that I went to, and I don't know, like maybe it was just Matthew Lillard being Matthew Lillard, but he's like, Stu's available, and just the way he said and the way he looked at the crowd, it just something in my bones says that he was either nodding his hat a little bit to his involvement in the movie. I don't know. I just feel like it's there, and I want it so badly. So it may be like confirmation bias. You know what I mean? I'm creating this in my head, but I want it to be him. I want him to be in this movie so freaking bad.
I do too. And again, it's same with me. It could just be wishful thinking, and then trying to rationalize that hope with everything else. So, but again, that's what it is, right? It's fun to theorize, and it's fun to throw that out there. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see if we got anything right. If I feel pretty confident there's multiple killers, multiple Ghostface.
Oh, yeah.
I just really I don't feel that it's one, but it very much does feel like there's someone in charge, someone leading it, right? Because he says I'm something different. Well, that different could be, hey, we're a group, right? We're not one, we're not two, we're a group, right? We're a clan, we're a cult. It's different, right? So that could be what that means when it says different. I my gut does also say that I agree. I believe that Gale dies in this movie. I kind of hate it, but I think they have to do something to fully pass the torch and to fully, I think, I don't know. What do you do if you carry on and she's still alive? What do you do in that seventh to make her still a prominent? I don't know. It just feels like maybe it's time. They have said, I have heard, and I this has been put out there with the blessing of the production, the company, and everything else. There is a trailer scene, so we'll see what that means. Obviously, hopefully, maybe that sets up something for 7.
Yeah.
But how impactful will it be, right? How big of a thing will it be? I'm hopeful, and what I would really like to see is that trailer scene bring Sidney Prescott back into it, maybe for that final thing appearance in 7, and then the final finishing of her story. But we'll see. But I don't know. But that's the fun, right? That's why we like part of what we like movies is to theorize and discuss and see what happens. They could go a totally different direction, and I'm very excited to see what happens. Finger crossed, Team Stu. Let's see him come back, but we'll see. So, Ike, there it is. We've discussed the Scream franchise. We have theorized on Scream 6. Let's bring this thing to a close. Next week, we will be reviewing Scream 6. And, we will own our predictions, right? When we do our discussion next week on the movie, we'll say, okay, these were our hits and misses. It could have been all hits, could have been all misses. Who knows? But we will own it, right? We will not try to make excuses.
Nope.
We'll own what we're standing on here.
I'll own my bullshit, I promise.
That's right. Maybe it'll be fun. Maybe it'll be a good thing. So Ike, before I close out, anything you want to say here? Anything you have? Final words on the Scream franchise?
I'm feeling woozy here.
That's right. Well, hopefully again. Let's bring back Stu. We'll see. We'll see soon. Right. What's going to be hard is that I'm probably going to see it a day or two before you. Pretty much, and I have to. We always keep our opinions to ourselves on these movies, so that everything's very natural in our discussion. Right. We're having our first reactions to each other, and man, this one's going to be hard. This one's going to be hard to not say anything prior, because I will have seen it like 2 days before you. When you see it, I mean, literally, when I see it, I will be 6 days before we record. When you see it, it's going to be like 4 days before we record. Man, that's going to be a long period to not say anything.
It's going to be a long 4 days.
That's right. And who knows? I have high hopes that maybe during that time period, I might try to squeeze in a second viewing. I'm kind of hopeful that maybe I'll do it. If I really, really like it and enjoy it, I will probably try to go see it a second time before we record. I'm hopeful. I'm excited. I've not been this excited to go see a movie in a theater in a while. This feels, it feels like an event to me, right? It feels big. Yeah. It feels fun, and I'm excited. I love the Scream franchise. I'm excited for the film. I'm excited. I'm just the event. It's it's fun, and I look forward to it. So until next episode, where we will review Scream 6, make sure you subscribe to us and follow us on all the social media outlets that we discussed earlier. And until then, wherever you go, whatever you do, be good, be safe, have many pleasant nightmares.